Yeah, let's go, bro.
All
I'm
right, bro.
down.
It's so dark in there. I can't see you.
This is Based with Des and Hiram.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's Carissa or Des here.
Des and Hiram.
And we're here for
joining.
a live podcast episode with our friend Miquel, who is a fellow anti-fascist and also a podcaster. And,
Awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait. He's actually in the waiting room now, so let's do our introductions and then we'll let him in.
Let's get him in.
So how's your week been, Hiram?
It's been good. Tiring. I'm back to work after the holidays. I've been spending a lot of time with my family, and I feel like it's been good time, with my mom and with my brother and sister. I think is our one thing I'll point out, and I'll make it short, is that as our family has progressively become more financially stable, I've realized that, our holidays have become more cheerful. So, whoop, whoop.
Yep. I mean, money doesn't always bring happiness, but it definitely helps to be comfortable. I've just been editing a ton and doing that thing and staying sober. I'm not drinking anymore. And I also recently became a vegan, so dealing with the, just getting used to that, getting a healthy body and healthy mind. And yeah, it's been great so far. I haven't gone out in like over 2 months. I've just been kind of a hermit working on things, art projects and things also. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
All right.
That's
Go ahead.
Yeah, let them in. Those are some positive changes. Definitely, Carissa, I always say this, you're an inspiration. And I like the derivative of that word because it's a breath of fresh air.
Oh, okay.
Inspiration. Inspire.
Oh, how have I not thought of that? I mean, it makes sense, but I've never thought of it that way. All right. There we go. Let's see if Miguel's still there. He's been waiting for a while.
Miquel, allegedly.
Allegedly. We don't even know if it's really him. Hello.
Hello.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, loud and clear. Absolutely.
Awesome. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Ready to do this?
Yes. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Oh, it's all right.
Yeah. I have a technology demon today,
Gotcha.
Which I have sometimes. It happens.
No worries.
It's funny because I do editing all the time and I use technology constantly throughout my day, but it still haunts me a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to be the death of me. I have a love-hate relationship, like I told you. How have you been? How was your holiday season?
It was good. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's been a lot of places shutting down due to coronavirus right now. So Olympia's not doing too well with things. But otherwise, yeah, I had a pretty good holidays. How about you guys?
Yeah,
Same.
Yep. Spent time with the family and that's about it. Just had a
Nice.
really relaxing holiday. So.
Yeah. I can't say any different. I did get to spend it. I spend it every year in Mexico, so that was fun.
Nice. Yeah. What part?
Right at the border. Ciudad Juarez is where the majority of all my 150 something cousins live. So
wow. All right.
yeah. Crazy. No TV back then. Like 150 something.
Oh wow! I thought I had a lot of cousins.
Yeah. They didn't have TV back then in Mexico. I don't know. My grandma had 14 kids, and then my other grandma had 13. So.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
My ex's grandparents had 16 kids.
Oof.
I could not imagine.
Oh my God. Yeah, no,
Drinking for like 20 years, pretty much.
no, I mean, seriously though. Wow. Oh man. Um, again, no TV.
What'd you say? No TV?
Yeah. It's what my mom always says, like when she talks about like, how they used to have a lot of kids. She's like, it's because there was no TV.
Oh, yep. Stay entertained somehow. It's true. So, Miguel, I actually met you through the social justice protests. You are live stream. You're an independent journalist as well as Hiram and I. And I met you on the ground a few months ago, but we had been following each other on social media since we're both, in the Pacific Northwest. I saw a lot of your posts, and I saw recently that you started your own podcast, and it's called The Post Capital, right?
The Post Capital. Yeah, that's correct.
And where do you live stream that, or where can people find that?
That is on Spotify right now. We are working to expand to other platforms, but yeah, that's our current project right now. It's me and my friend Miquel. It's called A Post-Capitalist and Anti-Fascist Analysis of the News. So basically, really specifically talking about anti-fascism and movements, things like that. So
very cool.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
So today we will be talking about your experiences in the Mormon Church, and a little bit different from things that we normally talk about. But I posted something in my story. I was looking for somebody who had escaped a cult, or not escaped, but I guess I'll just say that. And I had like 10 people reach out to me saying that they were part of churches like, the Mormon Church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and like Southern Baptist and stuff like that. And I had no idea people would be reaching out to me about churches. I thought it would just be like these, people would be reaching out from these who had been in these cults, these like small cults is what I imagined. But it was all people who had been very religious who are now, anymore. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
You kind of imagine like Heaven's Gate when you're thinking about cults.
Yeah. That's when you posted that on your story, I did feel a little strange about reaching out with my specific experience being the Mormon Church, because I know, there are more cults out there and more culty things. Honestly, if you were in the Olympia area, you could find a lot of people that are tied to the Ramtha cult. And that's, much more of an actual cult. But I would hold that, although the Mormon Church has like 16 million followers worldwide, it is very cultish. It has a lot of cult-like behaviors and a lot of cultish beliefs. So, excited to talk about it because that has been a part of defining some of my work,
So
absolutely.
How long ago, or how long were you in the Mormon Church for?
Well, I crossed the border when I was 7 years old, and I got adopted by a white Mormon family coming across. I was born in Tijuana. So, yeah, since I was like around 11, really, that's when, I became integrated into the church, and I quit when I was about 17 because I got sick of it. I also came out at that point, and that was another big part of what they don't accept in the church. But yeah, so probably about 8 years, and then I kind of made my own decisions.
And had you the opportunity, would you have made those choices earlier, or was it like, at 17 you came to the epiphany you didn't want to go, or had you been holding off for a long time, and then at 17 you finally decided you were ready to let go?
Yeah, no, 17 was when I decided to let go because I had been debating a lot with a lot of the church's beliefs. Some things I'll talk about as well, but really it started when I was like about 14. That's when I started to question. And it was actually just reading their own books and their own Book of Mormon, like gave me a bit of an idea as to how fucked up they were.
Yeah. So you just started realizing yourself, or like, did you talk to other people about it, or was it just something that you kind of kept in and you were like, man, this doesn't feel right? Or
This is kind of part of what makes the Mormon Church very cultish, is that my social circle was limited to just people in the Mormon Church, and like that's kind of a lot of Mormons choose to encapsulate themselves and have that be their community. So although I went to public school and everything, I didn't really talk about it there because I grew up in Utah for quite a few years, and in that instance, that was where. I guess most of the people that I went to school with were Mormons, right? So didn't really get the opportunity to challenge it myself too much. Yeah, I mean, I'll just go ahead and start it off by saying it started with me being 14, reading the Book of Mormon. There's a very deeply cultish belief that they have in the founding of this continent. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. For those that don't know, the Mormon Church, it's a lot like the Seventh-day Adventist Church as well, because, now that you mentioned that, it was actually founded around the same time, the 1830s, and the people that founded that church knew each other, and they had a lot of similar beliefs.
Okay.
But
it was Joseph Smith that was the founder of the Mormon Church. Did he have any involvement with Seventh-day Adventists? Adventist Church.
As far as I know, he knew the founder of the Seventh-day Adventists, and actually, so he started out his whole little starting out this church with the Great Awakening in the 1820s, which is when there was a huge religious revival across the states. A lot of people were turning towards Christianity, and with that, he started to question other churches, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to make my own church. And that's Seventh-day Adventist was one of those churches made in that wake. So he knew a bit about it. He had attended. He chose to go his own way with the Mormon Church. But yeah, Joseph Smith founded the Mormon Church. He was 14, and he says he had some vision and saw
that
two.
Was in New York.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. In Upper New York, I believe it was. Forget the name of the town. It's around the Finger Lakes. Actually, I think it's Fayette, but anyway, no. So he claims that he saw this vision of God. He claims that God came down and gave him golden plates that he translated into the current book that the Mormons use, the Book of Mormon. And specifically with that book, it is a lot of people describe the Mormon Church as the most American religion, because it is very deeply about the concept of America being the promised land to the colonizers,
Oh, wow, okay.
And it does have something to do with indigenous people too.
Yes, yeah.
It's about the bringing indigenous people closer to God was kind of like the base of it, or like the basis of it, right? In the beginning.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Can you hear me okay?
You're a little bit faint, but yeah, now I can hear you.
Can you hear me okay, Hiram?
Yes, ma'am. But I have headphones, so.
That's probably what it is. Yeah,
I'll turn up my mic a little bit. Can you hear me a little bit better?
That's a lot better. Yeah,
that's a lot better.
Okay. I was saying that didn't the Mormon Church, didn't it start because white settlers wanted to bring indigenous people closer to God? Wasn't that part of the why it started in the first place?
Not necessarily, but they do have a very racist view of the indigenous people. They've created their own history to the indigenous populations of the United States. Their belief that the Book of Mormon teaches that there was a family living in Israel back in 600 BC, and they decided to leave because of a king named Zechariah. So they got onto boats and they sailed all the way over to the Americas, and on their travels, and when they got here, they believed that they were the first people to found the continent, which is a bit ridiculous to me. I mean, 600 years before the supposed birth of Christ, that's a little, well, obviously our history here is a lot longer, However, what they believe is that when the family got here, they had a split, between the people that wanted to follow the Jewish God and the people that wanted to not, just worship their own gods, whatever. But what they claim is that the half of the family that split from God all got brown skin. So what they believe is that society, the white people were the Nephites and the brown people were the Lamanites, and they got into this perpetual conflict for 1,400 years until all the white people were wiped out, is what they believe. And then they believe that all the native tribes, all the Aztecs, descendants, whatever. They believe all of them are the remnants of the evil people. So yeah. So and you know, like with
all
the
of
concept,
our ancestors.
yes,
Our ancestors.
all of our ancestors were evil, and that was like I was reading that when I was 14, and I looked at my mom, who's white and adopted us from coming from Mexico, me and my two younger sisters, and I was like, hey, like I feel weird about reading this. Like, are you saying that all my ancestors are evil and yours are all cool? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's a very racist view, and yeah, there's a reason that it's called the most American religion, because all of their lore centers around the United States. And yeah, it's some pretty disgusting manifest destiny type shit where they believe that this land is their white promised land, even though
yeah, I mean it's
belongs to us.
The same story that we've been hearing in our from our textbooks for years.
Absolutely.
Similar story.
Yeah.
That white people are the supreme, and everybody else is causing problems for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting that you mentioned manifest destiny is like offshoot, but it would feel to me almost like if they may have even developed in parallel, right? Like, because manifest destiny very much so was like this idea that there was a higher supernatural purpose for the colonization of the United States. Like, it was, yeah, I don't know, it was like colonizing, but make it religious. And it sounds like we have a lot of similar tropes there, even to the point where you might think they share ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what it's based off of, especially with the Mormon Church, is they believe that this land is theirs. They specifically believe, this was also another thing that got me when I was a kid. They believe that the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were created and what have you, according to the creation story, they believe that is actually in Jackson, Missouri, of all places. Like, specifically Jackson, Missouri. I don't fucking know why. The church did get started in New York, but they kept trying to build these little communities for their church, and they kept getting kicked out from place to place to place.
Wait, let me clear this up. So they think that Garden of Eden is in Missouri?
Yes.
It was?
Jackson.
Yeah.
Missouri.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and it just doesn't make sense, because obviously they believe that all the people that founded the Americas came from Israel or came from the Middle East, and that is that, like, if you talk to people who actually study theology and things like that, they believe that the Garden of Eden existed. It's 100% in like Yemen or something, but no, definitely it's it's a pretty wild belief, because it's very much their attempt to try to make it as American as possible.
Mr. Allegedly, how parallel would you say Mormonism is to Christianity? Like, what are similarities, differences?
Well, when I'm discussing Mormonism as a cult, there are a lot of people that want to try to say, specifically, Christians on the right, they want to try to say that the Mormons aren't Christian, per se. They very much are. They do believe in like the Bible. They believe in Christ. They believe in all of that. They believe in the resurrection of Christ and blah, blah, blah.
The Holy Spirit.
They're completely Christian. Their one difference with a lot of churches is they believe that the white God, because of course it's a white God, they believe like that God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit are all three different entities. And there's some churches that believe that, but that's a lot of the reason that people try to say, oh, well, you're not actually Christian. They're Christian. They're very Christian, and they have a lot of beliefs that like tie in. However, what I see kind of as the problem with Mormonism, organized religion, and really just like that specific branch of Christianity, it tends to have a lot more fascist talking points. I mean, particularly because they believe that this nation was kind of their white ethno state and they got fucked over. But yeah, that's like, to them, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Mormons are a lot more prone to be evangelical Christians, like extremist Christians. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Huh. Yeah, and it sounds that way because I think that maybe as a little bit as in contrast to Christianity, it seems like Mormonism is much more, like you said, focused on the United States. And when you have that kind of rallying around like one particular location or race of people, you start seeing that there's more ideas of like nationalism, and things where people like kind of group, themselves together and then see everyone else on the outside as an enemy. So yeah, it sounds like Christianity, but even smaller, sort of, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very niche form of Christianity, and it's interesting because I don't know. That's kind of like another thing that I've thought about with the Mormon Church is that with Christians, I met a lot of Christians that don't believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. They don't believe. A lot of them are like the Bible's kind of a metaphor. It's a way for us to be able to lead our lives, which is something I totally acknowledge, and I think is a good way to lead your life, not use it for law and policy. However, the Mormons are a lot more prone to try to affect government over this, and it's because of the way they were founded. They had several communities, like I was telling you, Nauvoo, Illinois, Winter Quarters, Nebraska, a bunch of different places that they tried to build these communities, and the community in the area ended up continuing to kick them out. Governors kick them out because of their, they try to say that they were persecuted, and I'd say that they were persecuted for a little bit from the beginning, but partially it was because they kept going into communities, marrying a bunch of women. Like they had a problem with polygamy, and it just, and they kept like organizing societies that were separate. I guess, it's a little bit of that dual power. That's what I find very funny about the Mormon Church now is that for the most part, most Mormons are extremely right wing. I would say that it's interesting because the communities that they founded in the beginning, Nauvoo, Illinois specifically, were socialist havens. They were very much socialist. Everybody had to give a certain percentage, and then it was spread equally among whoever needed it. So, they went from being, and when they founded Utah, because that's the people that founded Utah as the Mormons, they had to trek all the way from Nauvoo, Illinois, came to Utah, and then they founded their own government. And like they actually intended to be their own country, and they went to war with the United States over it. But
I didn't know that.
It was a socialist thing from the beginning.
Talking about that, do you think that in the Mormon religion, there's a more, I guess, a bigger disposition to reject notions of things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, more classical liberal ideas that we uphold as a country, because they're very America oriented, right? But America is founded on classical liberalism. We're one of the first countries to adopt classical liberalism. And I'm talking not like liberals, like today left. I'm talking like ideas of like democracy, autonomy, human rights, etc. Do you think that like, it even sounds like there could be a contradiction, right? Because it sounds like the Mormon religion is very America centric, but then America is very classical liberalism founded, but then classical liberalism allows for the freedom of religion, which sounds like it'd be contradictory. Maybe that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, and what I find funny is the fact that the Mormons love America so much, even though during the first 10 years of them starting out their church, they were 100% persecuted by the American government, and they went to war with the American government. But it's a lot like the Puritans when they came across from the pond, if you will. They said that they were doing it for the sake of freedom of religion, right? But then they ended up building societies where they refused anybody who was not part of their religion and kicked them out. The Mormons did the same. They said that they were for the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but once they actually got to Utah, it was very much like, this is our society. We're going to build it this way. You have to adhere to our standards. And they wiped out a lot of indigenous people in order to do that.
Yeah.
Would that government that they attempted to establish in Utah, I don't know the extent of your knowledge, but would that have been considered a theocracy, like a religion-based government? Okay.
That was exactly their intent. It's not like they were going to found a separate government and have the Mormon Church alongside it. The plan was for Brigham Young to lead the new nation. And he did become the governor for a little bit once they became a territory.
So like establishing a government, like a theocracy, and probably not upholding the freedom of religion, like okay, I see. It's interesting.
It seems like he got there to Utah, and then he got greedy. It's like, I need to run this whole thing.
Yeah.
Freedom of
Run this
religious.
whole country.
Freedom of religion who?
It's it's interesting, especially with the concept of the government, the U.S. government alongside it, because like I was saying, they did go to war. It was James Buchanan, who was the president at the time. He got these reports that, and it was particularly from people that really didn't like the Mormons, but he got reports that they were trying to build their own country, and then also they claimed that they were uniting with the indigenous people in order to be able to create that government, which was completely false. Like, they did not like the indigenous people. They did not like black people from the beginning. But they did, so James Buchanan sent over like a battalion of soldiers, and they ended up like going through a small war. And it was really interesting because the Mormons didn't know how to fucking fight. All they did was they built a lot of things that looked like cannons, enough to scare them off. And that was, they just kind of hid in the mountains, and that was pretty much it.
That's kind of a funny picture.
Yeah.
That's incredible, though. Honestly, I had no clue that there was this conflict between the U.S. government and I guess the Mormonism as an institution. I had no clue there was that attempt to establish a government, which, I mean, in itself is like, a huge undertaking. Do you know approximately how many people were like actively participating or working on building that government? Like, was it a large amount of the population, or?
Well, it was anybody that moved to Utah at the time. Actually, what they first wanted to call the place was Deseret, which according to one of their books means bee, like a honeybee, because they view themselves as industrious people. They work together, things like that. So it is kind of socialist, even though they uphold
That's what I was going to say. It sounds
goods.
like a socialist society.
Yeah, it is slightly socialist, and what their intention was to have it be completely socialist, where you gave your dues to the church, and then the church took care of you. So yeah, there was a large trek. It was called I don't know what it's called, but yeah, I think it was 1847 was when they officially started trekking over, but there were huge wagon trains that were going over to Utah to settle and create Salt Lake City.
Wasn't it the 1820s that Mormonism started?
So the 1820s was the great revival, the great religious revival. That was when Joseph Smith had his vision, and he started working on some of it, but it was 1832, I believe, that they were officially founded as a church.
So he just birthed it in his mind in the 1820s.
Yeah.
It seems like it's the human condition to want more power when you have it. And it seems like that's kind of what happened with the leaders of the Mormon Church. And I see that, and you see that happening with many religions. There's somebody who has power over all of these people in a church, and maybe their intentions were pure and good to begin with, but they start at a lot of churches, they start making money and they have this power, and even though they see themselves as holy people, they still give in to greed, I think. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what happened with Joseph Smith too. I don't know if you guys know, but he was assassinated by a lynch mob, actually. So he was arrested in Carthage, Illinois, and a large mob of angry white dudes showed up and shot him and a couple of his friends. And those people survived, but he was shot dead. But the whole thing is, because when you learn about the Mormon Church, growing up in the Mormon Church, you hear about the history of their prophets. Like, they believe that these people are the chosen men of God, and there's like a line of them, and they're all men, of course, right? But they specifically tell a very different story, a cult-like thing, where they're just lying about why in the first place Joseph Smith was arrested. People tried to claim that, you never really hear an explanation in the Mormon Church, or you hear, it's because he was a Mormon. But the actual law that they got him on was that he burned down a printing press in Nauvoo, Illinois, that was putting out things bad about him. And like, he just got pissed off and decided to burn it down. So.
He had a lot of pride too.
Yeah.
Like all the deadly
freedom of the press. But not something I think
yes.
I was going to say that's very symbolic. I mean, of all the things you can burn down, you burn down the printing press, like the number one way of disseminating information at that time. You know, it was like I don't know, it was a breakthrough. I mean, it's the reason we have journalism today. You talk about like, for example, like yellow journalism and its significance in the industrial era. All of that wouldn't have been possible without the printing press. You know, they uncovered all the secrets of the meat industry back then and stuff, all because they could spread all this. What a symbolic way to, I don't know, kind of establish your values and principles as a person and maybe as a leader of your institution.
Yeah.
Somebody said in the chat, because we are live right now, this will be edited and put on Spotify later, but for those listening, we are live and we are taking questions and everything. Somebody in the chat said that Joseph Smith was tarred and feathered. Is that true? Do you know?
Yeah, he'd been tarred and feathered. Multiple of their leaders were tarred and feathered. That's why it's so funny that they have like such a deep love of this country when they got fucked up by members of the country who supposedly support freedom of religion, freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, that definitely happened. He got tarred and feathered a few times.
And I think that is done to obviously humiliate the other person. And he seemed like he was a man who was full of pride, and that probably
no, it's like
pissed him off.
By the way, happy January 6th. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but
I think the Democrats are calling it Democracy Day.
Democracy. Oh, is that what we're going to call it now? No, and I'm not going to say that. Democracy Day. Yeah, this democracy. No, I just think about
because democracy won that day when people were
right
getting arrested.
Biden got elected, I guess, and that's kind of nothing. With I was just bringing it up because at the Salem Capitol, I remember last year they did have a effigy that they made of Governor Kate Brown that they tarred and feathered. So yeah, that's still something people are fucking doing for some reason. It's the same thing they did during the American Revolution, but it used to be cool. Now it's a bit cringe.
What do you do after that? Like, how do you walk away from that after being tarred and feathered? Like, how do you even get that? How do you even get it off?
It's hot tar and they put on it, burns your skin. Like, yeah.
And then basically you just have to wait for your skin to shed. Like your dead skin.
Probably, yeah.
Oh man, that sounds awful. But don't be shitty to the community.
I mean, yeah, back then that was like Miguel. So when I think of cults, right? I think of, I mean, many things, and I think that like you categorize cults depending on, you know, how close they are to actually being a cult, and I think an important part of it is really looking at their like hard policies, right? Because a lot of religions function like cults, but it's more like intuitive, implicit thing. Other religions, like for example, even the Jehovah's Witnesses institution, they have policies in place that are, you know, very obviously cultivating a cult, like, you know, exiling people that disagree, or, you know, not talking to folks that are not, and that's like an actual rule. It's not like you know, it's like not an implied thing or
not like a cultural thing.
Yeah. You get what I'm saying. What are some of those hard, you know, policies that, you know?
Well, yeah, you know, the Mormon Church definitely does exile people when they do not fall into, you know, whatever they believe. Like if you were caught in some kind of sin per se, you can be denied being able to go to church at all.
Would something as personal like watching porn get you? Okay.
I mean, yeah, if you do it long enough, obviously they do have some measures for forgiveness and repentance and blah, blah, blah. So you can do your penance, but at the same time, they do have a cap, right? And it's like, you know, they have exiled a lot of people. However, you know, something as simple as like watching porn, they're probably not going to ban you for, which is another thing that they forbid. But specifically, their view on gay people or queer people or trans people is what is pretty deeply concerning, because that is a way to get yourself banned, especially if you transition or if you are questioning your gender and you express that at all to your bishop. That can very much be a reason for you to be excommunicated. So there's
kick
that.
You out. That's how that happens. You just
what's the extent?
And then also, you know, you're alienated from your whole community, I'm sure, because nobody wants.
And that's, you know, that's a big part of it.
Excommunicated from their church.
that's like the other half of it, is that it is slightly cultural in that sense that, Mormons are very, very insular, and to the point that if you are to walk away from their teachings, you're probably not going to be accepted by your family because it is a really big thing,
So my question, yeah, and I was going to ask, what's the extent of like exile? Because I know like for Jehovah's Witnesses, like you're not even allowed to talk to your parents if you are exiled. Like if you're excommunicated, you got to move out of the house, got to stop talking to your cousins, got to stop. It's happened to a few of my family members.
Well, that's, that the Mormon Church doesn't necessarily have policy around that specifically. They can ban you from going to church. They can ban you from participating in several of their rituals, if you will. But no, I mean, they don't necessarily have a rule. However, it is a cultural thing in the Mormon Church where if that often happens, that people do get kicked out, your parents won't talk to you anymore, things like that, because you're questioning the church at all. And yeah, it's just they have very harsh policies around like doing everything your parents say. And I think the other part of what makes a cult like is how much they forbid you from doing a lot. Like you can't watch our movies, you can't drink coffee or tea, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't go on a bender, which I guess is
you're not supposed to watch porn also.
Yeah, not supposed to watch porn. Not
somebody was saying that if you watch porn, you have to go tell a bishop or whatever. And then there's like a lot of public humiliation that happens afterwards. So
that's exactly what it is.
They like announce it at the front of the church, like, "Hey, we saw Des on her phone watching some porn." Like, do they announce it like to the whole church or what?
Not necessarily, but people can tell. I'll tell you a little story of mine, which is when I was 14. I was a 14-year-old boy, so of course, you can imagine what happens when I'm alone. What did happen. And let's just say I crossed that line and I had to communicate to my bishop because my mother was suspicious. I had to like tell him like, yes, I have indulged in masturbation. Okay. And because of that, they forbid you from participating in like certain courses and participating in doing sacrament and things like that like everybody can tell, especially
like my body touched itself.
Yeah. And like, especially with the fact that when you're 14 or when you're 12, like that's another part of their cult-like thing is they believe in these powers that they give the youth, or they give it's specifically men. They don't give it to women, but it's the priesthood. And so, they'll endow you with the powers of the priesthood. And then after that, you can participate in doing sacrament for everybody. And that's like one way in which I was kind of forbidden for like 3 months from participating in doing that at all because I was a guilty sinner. But that's I think the other part too, forget where I was going with that, but yeah.
I think you were talking about the punishment of masturbation.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it, is that they do very much have some measures in place to have it be a public humiliation type thing without the bishop like actually getting up there and being like, Miquel did this, fuck him. It's a little bit different, but it's very...
Like, has a megaphone, hey, everybody.
Yeah.
So
before we go on, I just wanted to read the definition of a cult really quick. Hold that thought, Hiram. I guess I'd never looked up the definition before, but to me, when I think of cult, I think of a group that has this charismatic leader and you have to do certain things and there's certain things that you can't do. And then it's kind of like what you've already mentioned, like you are like a social pariah, like you're alienated from your community completely if you do these things that are wrong, or sometimes even worse. Sometimes they'll even threaten to do physical harm to you and your family, from what I understand, like the very hardcore cults. But when I'm reading the Oxford definition, it says a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. That's another similar definition. And then there's another one that says a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing, a cult of personality surrounding the leader is an example. So, I guess you could.
The only thing that I would say that the Mormon Church might not fully fit the definition is it's a lot bigger than a small group of people, even though it started out with 6 people. But now it's like 60 million worldwide. They've got a bunch of temples everywhere. However, no, I would say they definitely fit the definition from the first part of the veneration and adoration of a charismatic leader. That is their prophets. It's who they listen to at all. To the point that like basic science, basic reason, if your leader says this, like you have to believe it. I think specifically there's a quote that I remember when I was questioning the Mormon Church, and I expressed that to my parents. They gave me some like reading to do, and they're like, "There's this quote that is really important, Miquel. It's this man named Dieter F. Uchtdorf. He's a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, one of their higher ups currently." And he says, "Doubt your doubt before you doubt your faith," which I'll be honest, when I was at that age, I was like, oh my God, that's so deep. Like, wow, now this is something I'm realizing belongs on like r/I'm 14 and this is deep, because that's
it sounds very cultish to me.
It's very cultish. It's like literally don't question shit. Don't question shit. You have to pray to God and try to like figure it out, which I mean, that's maybe the Mormon Church isn't. I mean, the Mormon Church is not necessarily unique with that aspect, but it does enforce it a lot more than other churches. Like Catholicism, per se, like it's a little less strict than that. Unless you're like an Irish Catholic, and then it gets intense. But yeah, no, that's so I would say that it does fit the definition of cult. And there's other things that like they do certain rituals that I would describe as cultish, even if like they do like baptisms for the dead. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I don't really know much about Mormonism other than what's outwardly seen, because I have some family members who are Mormons, but they don't really talk about it too much. And I don't know if they're excommunicated, but they moved because so it was my ex's sister, really quick. My ex's sister's husband. So he was a Mormon. His family grew up Mormon. And I don't know how it works, if she had to like marry into Mormonism or what, but she became Mormon, and they weren't as accepting of her in the community because she was new. And she just felt like she just did not belong. So they ended up moving, and she doesn't really practice Mormonism anymore. But yeah, that's all I really know about Mormonism is the basics, Joseph Smith, Utah, like, not really much other than that. So,
for sure.
Yeah, no, I actually kind of want to follow what you're saying and ask more specifically. So one thing about cults, like Scientology, the Institution of Jehovah's Witnesses, is that all across the board, they have somehow successfully kept uniformity in practices and beliefs. Specifically, I know like the Jehovah's Witnesses Institution, they have headquarters in New York, and each and every single religious meeting around the world connected to the Jehovah's Witness Institution is exactly the same every day for everybody. Like same verses, same teaching for everybody all around the world. And that's, part I think of a very successful cult is being able to maintain that uniformity. Do you see that in Mormonism?
Yes, kind of. There are certain things that when you go to church every Sunday, you do have to like you have to do certain things in order to have your religious meeting in the first place as part of the congregation. Like the sacrament is a ritual that you have to say the exact same prayer every single week over the bread and water to bless it. That's something I participated in. So I would say that in and of itself kind of fits that definition. The meetings, however, they change because it's people running it, so they'll just come and you might have a speech from somebody on some other topic and blah, 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 but they have a very very strict schedule as to how they do this, and you have to have like the sacrament first, and then you can start having your talks. And then, so yeah, they do have those rituals. I think the other part, what's more cult-like is what they do in the temples, because for those that don't know, Mormons have built a bunch of temples, is what they call them. They're like big white, like, I don't know, cathedrals type, Gothic type architecture.
Yeah,
some of them. Those. Yeah,
pointy.
They are pretty buildings, I will say, but what happens inside of them is very cult-like behavior. I remember when I was, in my teen years, along with having the priesthood, I was expected to participate in baptisms for the dead, and then at one point I started administering the actual baptisms. And what that looks like is like
Please don't tell me that it's dunking dead people in water.
No, no, yeah. Luckily, nobody's actually dead. But what happens is, like, let's say I'm the one doing the baptism. I take you, and we get into the water, and then I say, like, I'm baptizing you on behalf of this dead person, and then I dunk you, and then cool, like you're all set. But that's like one of the weird things they do.
But what is that? What do they think that does? Do they think that?
Well, they think that gives you
spirit or something.
Yeah, it's like it is very much that. What they believe is when you are baptized, all your sins wash away and you get to start from a clean slate. But you can only do that once in your life, and you're supposed to do it at 8 years old. However, when you're a convert, you can do it then. I kind of wish I were a convert so I could get all my sins washed away. But no, it's that part was very cult-like, particularly. Well, particularly because you're not supposed to talk about it. Like, I'm probably going to go to hell if the Mormon God is real over telling you guys about what we do in the temple in the first place. You are not supposed to talk about these things. You're not supposed to talk about the rituals, things like that. I only ever made it through that part of the temple. There are multiple parts of the temple where you get married inside temples. That's the only place that you can get like a celestial marriage. And what they do is when you turn 19 or when you're about ready to go on your Mormon mission, about to spend 2 years going overseas teaching people about your church, what they do is they do an endowment, which is where they bless you with a bunch of weird symbols and they give you the magic underwear. You're supposed to wear those garments, the magic underwear, for
oh my gosh, I'm so scared.
everything. Like I think you're supposed to fuck in them. I don't know. I can't verify that, but something like that. You just have to wear them constantly.
But
and they have like weird
just one
symbols.
Pair?
No, you can buy multiple pairs.
Okay, I was like,
you have a bunch of pairs. That would be pretty gross. Yeah. That would be the most cult-like thing.
Wash them every day.
No, like they do have to wear them, and you can obviously switch them out for clean ones. But what it is it's so interesting because I remember, like I grew up with 6 kids total in the family. So my mother would do everybody's laundry and then we'd all take turns folding it. But I remember every time that I did the laundry and her shit was in there, like I was forbidden from touching it. I was forbidden from asking questions about what the symbols meant because I was curious about like, what's this? They wouldn't tell me, So yeah, they're very secretive inside the temples, and it's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, sounds like something out of a horror movie.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to segue that because that question about the uniformity across, Mormonism, and you're talking about, all these rituals. One thing that's kind of unique to me in my experience learning different religions is, for example, specifically in the Jewish, religion, Judaism is complicated. It's as much an ethnicity as it is a religion, but the religious part of Judaism is kind of like really diverse, right? There are synagogues, but then there are like, what's called like progressive synagogues where they've developed beyond orthodox beliefs and they like accept, gay marriage. They carry about like they have like, for example, lesbian rabbis, etc. Right? So, and in the Christian religion, you see something similar, right? You see that in certain churches, they're incredibly conservative and really racist and transphobic and homophobic. And then you find other religions that are led by more, flexible or progressive leaders. And so there's a lot more acceptance. And I think that is mainly because Christianity and some of the other religions are not so institutionalized. For example, like Jehovah's Witnesses, where like just across the board, everybody's reading the same thing every day. Do you find that there's any progressive or slightly different, or maybe even like, different Mormon practices that people disagree on? Or is it like, is everybody just across the board pretty much homophobic?
Everybody across the board is pretty much homophobic. That's like, yeah, unlike
That makes it a little bit more cult-like, right? Everything is
absolutely.
Yeah, I think specifically the point you bring up, because there are like if you're a Baptist, you can find a Baptist church that is not transphobic. You can find one that's all about love and accepting things like that. You can't find that in the Mormon Church because the Mormon Church only has two sects of the Mormon Church. Unlike Christianity, where you can shop around and you can find what church is more fits into your beliefs. The Mormon Church, all of their locations and all of their churches have the exact same messaging, the exact same beliefs. Because they believe in it being from a living man dictating everything they believe. The prophet, like the guy. I think the current one is Russell M. Nelson. Don't quote me on that.
So there's always only one leader.
Yes.
Church.
Yeah. Okay. It's a bit fascist in the way that it's built. It's very hierarchical. You got that one person dictating everything.
And how do they choose that person? It's just like destiny, like the current leader picks their predecessor kind of a thing? Or?
No. And in fact, you serve until you die as the prophet. So
but I'm sure you have to have a backup because you never know when you're going to die. So you always.
It might be something like that. What it usually is whoever is the leader or the oldest serving person on the quorum of the 12 apostles, which is right below the prophet. That's the 12 people. That person will usually take over. Usually, sometimes they'll have a vision that somebody else needs to take over from the quorum, but it's only those people.
So God chooses the old white dude to be in charge.
And it's always
old white dudes under him.
It has always been an old white man. In fact, it was only 3 or 4 years ago that they finally put one person of color on the quorum of the 12 apostles. It was because people were criticizing because it was all old white men from Utah.
This is a challenge. I think I'm going to move to Utah and become first.
Salt Lake City is actually lovely.
Yes,
Salt Lake City kind of
queer brown woman. Here I come.
Yeah. Salt Lake City is not bad, even though it's funny because it's the capital of the Mormon Church, but most of the people that live there are not Mormons. In terms of Salt Lake City, once you start to get outside, everybody's Mormon, But yeah, it's kind of like the liberal stronghold against a red state. But to answer your question, it's Hiram, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I want to make sure.
You call me whatever you want, honestly.
All right, Mr. Garcia.
Suave Sobito. Suave Sobero.
El Suave Sobero, yes.
So to answer your question, what I was trying to say is, unlike other Christian churches where you can go to another one and find that doesn't happen, the only split that they have is that there is a cult of the cult called the Fundamentalist Mormon Church. And those people specifically they have the same beliefs. Their only difference is that they believe, they have, actually, let me correct that. They have two big belief shifts, which is number one, when the Mormon Church officially banned polygamy, because it did start out as a polygamous organization, men were allowed to take as many wives as they wanted. When that officially got banned, the leader at the time, Ezra Snow, tried to claim that it was due to the fact that he just got a vision from God and that's it. But honestly, the only reason that happened, we're trying to file to become a territory through the United States. And the United States told them, if you guys are going to continue practicing your polygamy, we will not allow you in. So they gave it up. The Mormon Church specifically started out as polygamous. It wasn't all the men, but if you were a man and you were chosen by the prophet, you were allowed to have as many wives as you wanted in order to propagate the Mormon Church and expand the following and stuff like that. However, it was around, I want to say 1860, maybe 1870, but after a little bit of time of them having founded Utah, they decided they wanted to become a territory and they wanted to become a state in the end. And the federal government told them, we are not going to allow you to become a territory if you do not give up your polygamy. That's it. Once you do that, you're fine. So the prophet at the time, Ezra Snow, decided that he had a vision where all of a sudden, we're not doing polygamy anymore. And that was a big split because there was a portion of the Mormon Church in South Utah that refused to give it up and have not given it up since then. They live in Colorado City, Utah, and they practice polygamy to this day.
Illegal, they still practice it.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. It's very illegal and it's still practiced somehow. But what's really disturbing, and this is another part of like, I tried to wrestle with that when I was in the Mormon Church, to like tell myself, oh, well, they don't practice polygamy anymore. And was it really that wrong? But what happened was, I don't have an issue with polyamory or
It's
somebody
okay if
choosing to get married to like 7 people. That's cool. My issue is that, and I think it was probably the same
they're
issue
kind of
the
forced,
federal
right?
government had. It's forced, yes, absolutely. And it often can involve 12-year-old girls. And that's probably why the federal government gave a fuck at all, because they were like, that's not appropriate. And so that's the
Forcing
thing, is that
children to marry you. Yep.
well, the leader of the current the cult of the cult, the fundamentalist Mormons, Warren Jeffs, he's been in jail for a long time because of this exact same behavior, where he was marrying young women or young girls, and yeah, and that's what got him. But
Barf.
unfortunately, they're still open somehow.
So we've come a really long way, right? Because I remember, I think we started talking about how rich white old men, or not rich necessarily, but white old men are always at the top of the
They're
cult.
all
And
rich. I'll add that.
I believe it. Yeah, and there's a reason why that was kind of my intuition, right? Wealth, man. Anyway, so I point that out because I find that, like, in most cults, it is essential to have, a very small leadership, and a very not uniform leadership, because then you have people all, like, that are leaders, all kind of pushing the same rules, across the board. And if you just had more people with different ideas, and you can't really have a cult, because, you start dissolving the passion for that one idea or that one person by diversifying the amount of ideas and people involved. And so I think that's very true for any organization you join, right? If you're joining an organization and there's only one person at the top, and then the person that maybe succeeds them or precedes, them, like, is the same, you demographically and ideologically, then you're probably, it's something like a cult, because, usually things that are not cultish allow for a diversity of ideas and leadership. Not things like pedophilia. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, because that's another big reason that it is a cult, is that they listen to one leader, and it's always a rich old white man. So yeah, they're always repeating the exact same thing. It's not like they've had, okay, so the recent prophet did make a tiny bit of a differentiation from the previous prophets for what he claims, which is, all he said was, we don't need to hate gay people anymore. Still forbidden from being in the church, still forbidden from going to temples, still forbidden from taking the sacrament, right? But it's kind of like, like Pope Francis being a little more nice than usual, and that is the only change in policy that they've really had, because it's not. Yeah, they did have
could never take a church seriously if they actually hate people. That seems like against what you're trying to do.
But they don't hate people. You ask anybody who's a Mormon, they don't hate them. They just wish they weren't gay and will do everything to stop them from being gay.
Right.
Like that's hate, in my opinion, especially as somebody that grew up, being queer and being bi specifically. Like I wrestled with that, and I was like, I know that, and I actually came out to a few of my friends before I officially came out when I was 17. A couple of friends
Mormon friends?
Yes, yeah, a couple of my Mormon friends, and they were more accepting, but that doesn't change. It doesn't really change the policy per se, because once it came out, then I wasn't allowed to participate. So,
okay, so now that you're not a part of the Mormon Church anymore, do you have a lot of family and friends that are still in the church? Is my first question. And two, my second question is, if they found out that you were talking about this, would they come down on you in any way, or come after me in any way for putting this information out into the world? Because it's supposed to be like, because it's supposed to be secret information, these rituals, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see them pitchforking me, but do you think that, I'm just curious.
That's a good question. So, I mean, I think they'll probably be upset with the fact that I'm talking with such negativity about the Mormon Church, but I also I don't communicate with most of my family anymore, partially because of their beliefs, and partially it is actually a year ago today that I talked to my grandmother, who talked to my mother, and apparently, and my grandmother is not a Mormon, right? So she called them and she's like, "Hey, I'm watching this on national television. I'm watching them swarm a Capitol right now. Like, what do you think of that?" And because of some of her beliefs, she justified it. She's like, "Oh no, they're doing the right fucking thing. Like, it's about time with all the illegals that are voting," is what she says. Uh, so yeah, I don't really communicate with my family, so they're really not going to come after you. Don't worry about that.
I'm not worried about it. I'm just wondering, like, in general, if they find somebody who publicly speaking about their
people
rituals.
do this all the time is the thing. It's like there's a culture, and you can find like subreddits about it called ex-Mormon, stuff like that.
Yes, I've been there.
Yeah. So I mean, people talk about those things on there because they want people to know. They want people to know, like, you really shouldn't be part of the Mormon Church. I still have a couple siblings that I talk to who are still involved, but I don't know. Fortunately, things have changed in the last year, I think, for a lot of people. And really, with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been a lot more conversations that are being had about like what this is about. I've been able to express the fact that I am the thing that I have the most problem with the Mormon Church is their racist, revisionist history of my people, the indigenous people that own this continent before. They have a very false story that they came up with, and that's been my issue. And it's been because of these conversations we're having about race, about history, about all these things where I'm able to express that. So, yeah.
Miguel, you are a staunch, anti-fascist activist. You have your podcast. You put yourself out there, right? And a lot of doing that involves having an understanding of your audience and the problem at hand. And a lot of that comes from our personal experiences. And I think you know where I'm going here. How do you think your experience in Mormonism has influenced your activism? How do you understand these racist tropes, maybe differently than somebody who wasn't personally involved for some time?
Definitely leaving the Mormon Church has been a huge part of why I'm such an anti-fascist today. From the beliefs that I grew up with, from some of the things that I was taught, I think specifically that, my family started to believe in QAnon shit before QAnon actually came out. It was like concepts of Hillary Clinton eats babies, stuff like that, before QAnon actually became the cult that it did, So yeah, that is a huge part of why I dedicate myself to taking on the far right, to calling out the far right, because I grew up as somebody who was far right, and to me, it is because of the family that I have that has some of those views. It is because of what I grew up with and the people that I was around in Utah that shared some of these beliefs that I am able to recognize their talking points to learn how to speak to them on certain things that are specifically the problem,
So, just how did your experience, or how does your experience inform the way that you react or feel about your family members having, these QAnon beliefs, racist ideas? A lot of people get angry. A lot of people are more patient. What's your approach?
Well, it depends on who I'm talking about. If I talk about my parents, I'm pretty upset with them, because I think that they are smarter than that. And I think that, but at the same time, I've been, I don't know if you guys follow this subreddit at all. It's like QAnon casualties. I would totally look it up because it's just literally about people that have lost their family to a cult, to the cult. And they're expressing, and I guess I've been reading that a lot. I guess I have a little bit of a problem with the quote ex-Mo culture, the ex-Mormons, there's a lot of people that make that their identity, make it about being angry at the Mormon Church, where I'm somebody that I can acknowledge I grew up that way and use it to my advantage, but I'm not going to spend every fucking day just trashing the Mormon Church per se.
Yeah.
It's a church. It's just as, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to grow from any experience that we see as negative, we have to not only forgive ourselves for being in that place, but also, we can't just hold that anger toward these people, because how are you going to move on and, be happy with your life?
Yeah.
You just have to, and it does suck that I'm sure that you have, people who are friends who you consider your family now, but it really sucks not to have, I have some excommunicated family members at all, and it really sucks because I want them to be in my life, but at the same time, you're like, you just have to accept it and be happy.
Hopefully, and that's where I'm at. I'm just grateful. I am grateful for the experience I had, even though I hated it. At the very least, I wouldn't be the person I am today without that experience. I think about that with a lot of things. I had a pretty shitty upbringing in Mexico. I grew up in the slums. So for me, it's the same idea. Like, sure, it was shitty, but it taught me to be a stronger person. It taught me to be able to recognize, like, when people are on some cultish like behaviors. But at the same time, yeah, I'm not that angry. I still love my two of my siblings are my biological siblings. I got adopted with me, and which is great. But they're Mormon, and I still love them. I just I just want to, like, as their older brother, I want to be like, look, there's so much that you're missing out on. Like, you can't drink in the Mormon Church. I like to drink. It's a really great part of not being Mormon anymore. Or tattoos. You can't get tattoos at all. I
personally don't drink myself, but I think just having that freedom to just do whatever you want and to not have shame for the things that you want to do. I get trying to be your best, but I mean, are people in the Mormon Church, have you met people who are actually happy in that lifestyle?
I mean, yeah, but honestly, I view it as, like, I don't want to say it this way because it seems disrespectful, but I view it as kind of like brainwashing. I think specifically about the fact that, like, in the Mormon Church, you are not allowed to have sex until marriage, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and in a lot of churches.
A lot of churches, right? I mean, that's kind of just a common belief, but they're very strict about it, where you have to be married to a Mormon in the Mormon temple in order to then be able to have fun, if you will. Mm-hmm. I worry about several of my friends that I grew up with in high school or middle school, because I'm seeing the fact that they are getting married, like, at the age of 18 ASAP. Like, once they get back from their mission, they find somebody, 2 months, they're married. And to me, I'm like, you're just doing that so you can get laid. And that's not a great reason to get married, in my opinion. Like, find somebody you like, get to know them first. Just my opinion, because I
agree with that.
I have seen multiple marriages through the Mormon Church that, like, I can tell they're both unhappy, but the Mormon Church has a very, very harsh point against divorce. They do allow divorce, but you will be ostracized if you get divorced, So there's a lot of people that I can tell, like, you're not happy, but you're doing this for the sake of your God, and that's not everything,
I have another question. So if I decided that I wanted to be Mormon and I, quit doing all the things that they wanted me to stop doing, would they be ready to accept me? Or what does that look like for new Mormons? Like, can I just go to Utah and join the church? Or is it, do I have to know somebody? Or
you can join the church here. Yeah. I mean, that's why they have missionaries, right? They have those young men who walk around in, suits and just knock on people's doors. Women are allowed to do it now as well.
So they're pretty, like, readily accepting of newcomers.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the Mormon Church definitely welcomes converts. They appreciate the fact that somebody is converting. However, there was an experience I had when I was a teenager that my mother had made this friend named Mike. And Mike and I got along because he was an anarchist, and, like, I was a socialist, so we would constantly talk about all these fucking ideas and blah, blah, blah. And I thought I'd made a friend. But unfortunately, with the way that Mormon culture is that usually when they're friends to you and when they're friendly towards you, it's for the sake of getting you to convert, and once you convert, sure, you'll still be friends. But if you ever stray from that path, like Mike did, and decide that he wanted to go his own way, you're not friends anymore. So the Mormon Church, like, sure, it's accepting to the point that it's not, to the point that it's just about like getting you to be fully following everything they're saying.
Yeah, so they're not too particular for who they originally want to get in. They're just like, hey, everybody, come join us.
Yeah.
But
So
to stay in the community, they're certain, they're pretty strict about that, about what you can and cannot do. I see.
Miguel, what can you tell us about missionary training? How effective are they at training people at confronting questions about, different religious beliefs, et cetera? Because, well, I'm not saying because who knows? It could be two different things. My experience in the Jehovah's Witnesses institution is that they are really fucking smart, and they literally teach, all their, missionaries, people going door to door, how to answer questions, mannerisms, just things that I taught myself and I learned, thinking, damn, this is like some manipulative shit, like kind of how they teach, because like, for example, when you're becoming the US president, they teach you how to do handshakes, how to stand, how to like, project yourself as a leader, overall. And so these trainings are very conscious of people's faults, flaws, of where people may trip up or where key points come up where you might be able to convert somebody, right? Is the training that extensive?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what happens is it's usually the age recently changed in like the last 4 years to where you're an 18-year-old, you're a guy, you have to wait another year if you're a woman. But if you're a guy, you get to go straight on your mission, right? And with that, they'll send you to a missionary training center for a number of weeks where that is literally all you do. You are just in the training center. That's all you're allowed to do. And you just literally, you learn about all the talking points. You learn like how to be able to communicate with people. I would say what's really concerning is how fucking good they are at it. Because,
Genius, bro.
Like out of nowhere, you'll be an 18-year-old and you'll get your mission papers and be like, holy shit, I'm going to South Africa. I have to learn Afrikaans now or Xhosa or whatever, And like they teach you within a couple weeks to be able to speak that language pretty fucking proficiently.
Like a boot camp.
That's like the one shitty thing. That's what it is it's Mormon boot camp. And that is like the one part of why I would feel bad at all for having not gone on a mission is that it'd be cool to know another language. Really, I would have liked to go back to my country and relearn my language.
If it's anything like my experience in the Jehovah's Witnesses institution, I never was a Jehovah's Witness, but my dad was, and I was always going, and, is that like, it's so well put together. I mean, these are things that I'm pretty sure you'd be learning like as a professional in like public relations or, public speaking. They're skills that are very well put together, and very effective, like a lot of charisma. I mean, you're probably learning the culture, you're probably learning the other religions, where people might be like, well, my God says this, and they train you to respond to the beliefs of other people. And I don't know, it's just, it's incredible. I mean, it's so like you said, you learn a lot. Like it's not just useful in the Mormon religion. It's useful because you're learning how to exploit, human. Anyway,
people
manipulation tactics in there. Very cultish, that part of it.
Very genius.
Oh yeah,
you gotta respect it. Honestly, like you have to.
Respect.
I mean, I have to respect the Mormon Church. It is one of the best like brainwashing organizations that has existed in my life, in our lifetimes. It's like, I mean, because people who are part of the Mormon Church are fully part of it. Like that's, and it gets kind of sad. I think specifically growing up in Utah, there was just so many people that being Mormon was their personality, and I'm like, there's just so much more to life than just being hyper religious. Like, congratulations.
Yeah, I think God would want you to enjoy the fruits of life as well. Yeah. If you believe that there's a God.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a different topic, but I went to a Jehovah's Witness church a couple times with a friend. She was really trying to convert me, and it was a little frightening because I kind of got cornered and pressured to come back. And I was like, well, I'm a Taurus. Like, if you try to pressure me to do something and put me in a corner, I'm just going to run, never come back.
Fellow Taurus, yeah.
But I was just interested in learning. I was like, what is this? Like, this is, encompassing her life. So I sat in a few times, and they were saying that there's just this like cartoon book that they give you to look at. And what put me off is that nobody can go to heaven unless you're like a priest or someone high up in the church. Why would you be a part of that church if you're not going to go to heaven? Like, why devote your whole life to something if you're not going to go to heaven? I guess
I forget about that. Yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe there's only like a certain number of seats, right?
Yeah, but the reason in saying this is because I was going to ask, what does it take to go to heaven for Mormons? Is it like everybody gets to go if you're following the rules, or?
I will say what I like about the one thing I like about the Mormon Church is they do have a little bit more nuance of a take to the afterlife that like is a little more compassionate than one would expect from their church, which is that they believe that like once you die, you'll basically be given three options for what world you live in. You can. Well, what they believe is if you die without having known the Mormon Church, you go to purgatory type thing. It's like a jail in prison or a jail in heaven where you basically learn about the Mormon Church, and then you're given the option to either accept it or not accept it.
Hashtag heaven jail.
Yes, yeah, heaven jail, heaven's gate in jail. So they believe that you'll be given that option, and if you deny the option, you're going to go to the lowest of the three worlds that they believe you're going to get. And also like it's so complex what they believe in. They believe in the celestial kingdom being like the most holy, the place where all the most holy people go. They believe in the terrestrial kingdom, which is a good place, but it's for people that like didn't really accept the Mormon Church, but they were still very good people in their life, so they believe in that. And then the third world they believe in is the telestial kingdom, which they believe is kind of like hell, but it's where all the people that were Mormon that denied the Mormon Church, it's where I'm going, and then they believe in outer darkness, but that's only for like Hitler and certain people. It's not like.
So where do I go?
Majority bad people. If you were to continue living your life,
float around and just disappear.
You'll probably go to like heaven jail for a little bit, and then you'll probably be like, this is weird, and you'll go to the middle kingdom because it's just being a good person. Like, so that's a little bit better. However, they also have this view that to answer your question about like how to get to heaven, you have to follow all the rituals of the Mormon Church. You have to get married in a temple. You cannot go to heaven or go to the highest kingdom if you are not married. It's another weird thing, but yeah, you have to get married.
In heaven jail?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Hey, heaven jail, boo.
You have to go to the temple. You have to get your endowments, things like that. Once you pass all that and you die, you go straight to that kingdom. But what they believe is like once God returns to earth, because they do believe God is coming again, this time with a sword to split the nations into Armageddon, basically. They do believe in Armageddon. And they believe once that happens, everybody who's up in that higher up kingdom is going to get their own planet and going to become their own God. Rad. Isn't that weird? Isn't that some weird shit? Yeah, they genuinely believe like everybody's going to just start creating their own universes and then we'll all be God, So
yeah, for those of you who are tuning in, I'm going to go to Utah and become the leader of the Mormons. The first ever woman, the first ever brown person, and first ever queer person. So here I go.
Yeah. Carissa, you mentioned something that piqued my interest. You were talking about how the Jehovah's Witnesses institution doesn't have like heaven. And so you're like, well, why would anyone want to believe in God? Well, they do believe in heaven, but not like heaven. It's called paradise. And it's supposed to be like, Earth. God created Earth to be paradise for humans, and then humans fucked it up. And then it became like this terrible place ruled by the devil. And then God's going to come and then remove the devil and then allow humans to live on Earth again and repopulate and then get rid of everything bad, like illnesses and aging. And so like, you don't go to heaven, you stay on Earth, and it's going to be supposedly this Earth, but it's like a paradise version of Earth where everything's good. And like, you could make out with the lion and it won't bite you. But what piqued my interest about what you said.
Is that a thing? Wait, hang on. Wait, what'd you say?
That like you could kiss a lion and nothing would happen. It's because like they always have little
Is that what they say?
Of people hanging out with lions because
okay.
I don't know, that's like supposed to be paradise, like you being able to hang out with a lion, you know, and not biting your face off. So I mentioned that because we said earlier that a very important facet or tenet of a successful cult is being able to create leadership that's really exclusive. And so I think that this idea that only certain top high profile elite leaders get the ultimate prize even further propagates this idea that there's only a select amount of people that are allowed to make the rules, which makes it even easier to continue having these cults, right? I think that that separation of like me versus an elite leader just rehashes that structure that's needed to maintain cults as they are, right? And to maintain them from collapsing, from having too many people with too many different ideas at once. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like that would be part of the reason why, you would want to separate the elite leaders from, us peasants.
I did have a couple questions from the chat. Somebody asked about soaking.
Oh my God.
And then somebody said, here's two things that we can talk about really quick. Someone said, my Mormon mom believes that dinosaurs came from another god's earth, recycled bits, and that's why they're older than the earth that is obviously only 6,000 years old.
Okay. So I'm going to answer the second question first. To the second question, when I was growing up, my parents taught me that all the bones that are left over, in the fossil index, that's all just put there by God to make us like question whether or not the earth is 6,000 years old. So pretty similar idea. I hear that a lot. I do remember growing up, I did have like a lot of debates with people because not everybody who's a Mormon believes the earth is 6,000 years old. That's actually not a full belief of theirs. But most people that are Mormon do. Most people, it's partially because they don't really understand history and science if they genuinely believe that the people that founded this continent came from Israel 600 years before the death of Christ, right? So, yeah, similar idea. But yeah, no, that's, I remember, I would always have debates with people and like 99% of the Mormons were like, yeah, no, it's 6,000 years old. I'm like, it really isn't. It really isn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can you summarize why or how they think Earth was created? Do they think that there's a Big Bang, or it's probably a long story, but can you?
That's the Mormons, like they have a pretty similar view to the Bible, which is that they just believe like 6,000 years. And it was like 4,000 years, that is, before the birth of Christ. They believe that like their whole story is that God created the universe in 7 days, right? And like, put man on earth and then created Adam and Eve and then took one part of Adam's rib cage and created a woman. And that's the reason that men have for the most part, usually have a rib cage missing. That's the whole creation story. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like they just believe in the fact that it was 7 days and then all of a sudden we're here and then all the shit happened in the Bible.
So they recycled Christianity and added their own prophets, kind of a thing.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, they recycled Christianity. They changed it to like make it more about America and then just created their own prophets. So exactly.
Okay. So as to the other, Mormons normally carry the Christian Bible as well as the Mormon Bible, is what somebody mentioned.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, they use the Book of Mormon. They also believe in like two other books alongside the Book of Mormon that they have written or were written by Joseph Smith that are like the Bible to them. So they've got like 4 books that they use. It's Doctrine and Covenants is the other one, which was written by Joseph Smith and other apostles. And then they believe in the Pearl of Great Price, which they believe is basically, this is a whole little side story, but back in like the 1830s, after Joseph Smith had already founded the church, he met a friend of his who was an archaeologist. And apparently this archaeologist found the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm sure you've heard of them. They're found in an ancient cave, and they supposedly have the writings of ancient prophets. But they specifically believe it was here's the thing: it's like you talk to anybody who can actually read like old Aramaic and old, symbols that they were using. That book does not say what Joseph Smith claims it does, like at all. It's he just created his own little book about Moses, basically, and that's yeah. So yeah, there's that, but that's kind of the thing.
This conversation is just reminding me about South Park, the Mormon episode.
Yeah,
I have to watch it again.
I'm pretty sure I mean, they also wrote the Book of Mormon because the founders were of South Park were ex-Mormons as well. So, but yeah. To the other question, soaking, I actually did not know about this until about a week ago when I was talking with one of my friends who knew about, like, me growing up Mormon, and she was telling me about it, and I had to, like, this is wild. So for those that don't know, there is a current little TikTok trend going around among like BYU students, Brigham Young University, and other like Mormon churches and Mormon schools. They believe that the way that you don't violate the law against fornication before marriage is that it's pretty weird.
You basically have sex without moving.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah. Okay, penetration. But
it's just penetration. You can just penetrate, but you're not really allowed to move.
If you have a friend who jumps on the bed next to you, it's not your fault.
Exactly. It's not your fault. That can bounce. So, and I just want to say, as somebody that that is not at all, like that's not a way to avoid breaking that law. You're just breaking the law. Like, congrats on getting laid. That's cool.
Penetration.
I always support that.
I mean, there's even sex without penetration, folks. So
yeah,
that is not true. I did see the meme for it like maybe a couple months ago, and it had me rolling.
That's wild. Oh man, are we ending on that note?
I think that's a good way.
I can tell that made you feel very uncomfortable, Hiram.
It didn't. I was like, wow, just.
This is not a very kid-friendly episode.
I'm just baffled by the creativity of humans. Like, I don't know. We find ways. Like, well, technically, the Bible said intercourse is like in and out, and if you just go in.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to sex, religious people can be very, very creative.
I think so. Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Miquel?
I was just gonna say, like, you have to get it out. So how is that not intercourse in the end? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, true.
You can't just lay there forever.
We all become really good prosecutors, mini lawyers, when we are trying to circumvent these ridiculous. That's how lawyers. That's what lawyers do. Like, straight up, like they're like professionals at like finding a way to define what you did as something else so that your sentence isn't as harsh or whatever.
Yeah,
like
everybody's finding loopholes these days. I'm just glad Mormons are doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe if they had no TV, but hey,
yeah.
Okay, so what happens to you if you have sex? Do you go tell your bishop? Do you get? Do they release you from the church?
Well, I mean, like, it depends, right? Obviously, depends on your bishop too. Your bishop will give you some advice. He'll be like, "Look, just don't take the sacrament for like 3 months."
Oh man!
Now you have to marry that person. What?
I mean, okay, so I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, so I just keep laughing because how much do you actually have? I mean, like, because there's having sex, but everybody has sex differently, right? Like, sex is a very general term. I mean, there's all kinds of interests in. Are there harsher punishments if you're like into a little more untraditional forms of sex?
No, I mean, not necessarily. It's just generally like sex in general.
Okay.
Or even like they actually have rules. I remember reading a book from from the Mormons as a kid. They have rules against necking and petting. Like that type of sexual type behavior that's not exactly sex. And they even have rules against that. So it's any type of intimacy is pretty much forbidden in the Mormon Church until you get married.
But it does depend on the bishop and the church, though, you were saying. And somebody in the chat said that they just dry humped like a good Mormon. And it got me thinking, like, I grew up Christian. I grew up Christian, not because my parents, forced me or made me go to church or anything like that, but because, I went on my own. I decided that I wanted to go. And I don't go to church anymore because there was always a deal breaker for me. Like, I actually found a really cool group and a good, like, Foursquare church. And the pastor said that women are not allowed to be leaders in the group. I was like, see you later. But anyway, so growing up, I thought that I needed to get married before I had sex. And I tried that for a long time, but it didn't work. But yeah, so the dry humping thing, like, we thought it was okay. We're like, we're making out, we're dry humping. We're not actually having, there's no penetration involved. So it's okay, but still, I mean, I don't know. It's
sounds like you were just breaking the rules.
Yeah, it's all ridiculous. There's no good loopholes.
We didn't finish on soaking, but I do have, I think, one question that is a good way to kind of wrap everything up nicely. Miquel, do you expect that there will be any significant ideological evolutions within the Mormon Church, or do you believe that the Mormon Church will remain the same until the day that it dies?
I've been keeping track, because the one thing I am curious about is that I feel like they might become accepting of gay people at some point. However, don't quote me on that, and I honestly don't have that much faith to that. It's just in terms of, like, the recent talking points that some of the leaders have had around, like, accepting your LGBTQ family, I think that things might shift, but that's pretty much the only shift. And I honestly don't see that happening because, I think it'll be about the same till the day it dies. And particularly because they've gone on so long as a church that is just beyond misogynistic. Like, women cannot hold any type of spiritual power. So, to me, that's kind of a sign of where they're going to remain for a while. We're living in 2022 and you still don't allow women to have the priesthood. That's pretty weird. So, but yeah.
Pretty cultish to me.
Yeah, definitely.
So to my understanding, a lot of Mormons showed up for the Black Lives Matter protests, as well as some LGBTQ marches, but maybe they're not, like, hardcore Mormons, or...
Well, I mean, there is a small sect of, it's not a sect necessarily, but there is a portion of Mormons, and particularly if you're, like, living in Salt Lake City, you'll probably find Mormons that are more accepting. But it doesn't really speak to most of the Mormon Church. Most of the Mormon Church is defined by the rural communities in Utah, that the people that are, like, upholding that church. But what I will say is, what was interesting when Donald Trump got elected, like, it was like 94% of Utahns voted against Donald Trump in the primaries because he does not stand for their values. That is the one thing I'll give him, is they are very, very moral people, to the point that it gets a little fucking annoying. However, they were even able to be like, hey, Donald Trump is not a good Christian man. He's a cheater and a terrible person, so we're not going to vote for him. Now, of course, he didn't win the state of Utah because they're going to go Republican no matter what, but it was pretty inspiring to see, like, how big of a gap there was there. So, in terms of, like, the Black Lives Matter movement, yes, Salt Lake City had a pretty big fucking turnout for Black lives in the beginning. But I don't know. I don't know what to prescribe that to. I think it's just humanity,
Yeah.
Would you say this is a broken clock that's right at least twice a day?
Yeah, that's a good metaphor for it, because there are some things that, like, the Mormons being such kind people can lead people to make right decisions, right? Yeah. However, their policy is kind of not adding up to that is all,
Right. I think their purpose is probably, I think there's some community in there as well, but I think, a lot of those people are just trying to be good people and do the right thing. But
of course. Yeah.
Before we go, you mentioned that because Hiram asked if you think that there'll be some evolution in the church, or if you think, and you said that you think it'll be the same, like they'll have the same practices until the day that the church dies. Do you see an end to the Mormon Church?
Oh, no. It's continuing to expand. And I think that it's the same thing with a lot of, like, religious views. As Mark said, right, religion is the opium of the masses. And I think that's kind of what I prescribe it to, is that we're seeing obviously the failures of capitalism, we're seeing climate change, we're seeing the world fucking falling apart, and I think a lot more people will turn to religion as a little bit of thinking that, oh, the end times are coming. I gotta find my God before. So yeah, I personally don't see it dying until the earth dies, and because it does control the culture of Utah. Like Utah would not be Utah without the Mormons, and that's yeah.
For those who are thinking about joining a church, my advice to you is to really look into the teachings of this church, and also talk to a lot of people who support the church and people who don't support it before you make such a big decision to give your life to a type of religion, because sometimes those religions are cults. Sometimes those churches are cults, as we have realized today.
Miquel, I just want to keep talking, but I know that it's not a good idea because then we'll never finish.
I think all three of us could just keep talking for hours.
Yeah, no, just with religion, it's so complicated. It's kind of, where people find their sense of purpose, structure to their moral systems, where they find a way to ascribe value to things that otherwise may seem, meaningless. I mean, it's kind of an escape from the bitterness and ugliness of nihilism. And I don't think religion should be an escape from nihilism. I think it should be a way of enhancing your life, and just to echo what you were saying, Des, if you're looking at religion for a desperate sense of purpose, or if you're looking at religion as an escape from maybe some nihilistic ideas or thoughts or feelings, where you feel like everything's meaningless unless you have a God, then, you're probably prone or predisposed to falling into these traps that make you feel good temporarily. And some of these religions are really good at identifying people who have that desperate need for more, and to exploit that, need for purpose or for a sense of value. I think about like Scientology. They'll give you an IQ test, a personality test, and then make you feel meaningless and then offer you meaning through the church. So don't look for your meaning in church, is what I'm saying. Look for it somewhere else, and then find, whatever supernatural belief complements what's, deep in your heart.
Yes. Thank you so much, Miquel, for joining us. And
thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, thank you everybody for watching, for listening. Please subscribe on YouTube. My channel is Carissa Does, and for the time being, that's where we're posting our our edited video podcasts. You can find us, you can look for Base Podcast on Instagram, and also please follow Miquel Allegedly. Miquel recently had his account taken down. I'm not sure exactly what happened.
I basically got removed. Follow me at Miquel Allegedly on Instagram, and then once I'm back up, it's at Allegedly Miquel. I just had to set up a separate account because I report on people who are members of the far right, and I basically doxed a anti-vaxxer in our community.
So then she got all her friends. Comes over and tries to.
Yeah, they start. It's their favorite thing. They love just mass reporting.
We call it dragging. Yep.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah. So you had like 2,000 followers. Hopefully, you can get that account back. So you can get that following back. How can people? Where can people? You said people can find you on Spotify, your podcast again.
Yes. Follow us. We are on Spotify. We're also on anchor.fm. That's a way to listen for free if you would like to. It is the post-capital, a post-capitalist anti-fascist analysis of our news. So
awesome.
Listen and catch up, and hopefully we can have one of you guys on soon enough.
Miquel, I'd love to talk about capitalism. Economic systems are everything I studied, so hit me up.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we'll do.
It's my area of expertise.
Yeah, he's more. Hiram is more interested in the politics side, or he's more knowledgeable about the politics side of things than I am. Although I too am interested as well.
But I gotcha. Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you again for being here. We will have live podcasts every week, hopefully, is the plan. So join us again next time, everybody. Have a great night. Peace, love, donuts.
Peace, love, donuts.
Adios.
All right.